Well, I want to say thank you for the warm welcome I've had here in Tacoma, and again, coming from Chattanooga, I hope that maybe I've traveled the farthest, and as Ali said last night, with my 8 or 9 hours getting here, I could have been in Paris or London, but I am so glad that I'm in Tacoma, because I'm finding some real parallels, and almost starting to say, well, Tacoma should be Chattanooga's sister city. I am here really to talk to you about the transformation of Chattanooga. Again, we don't have quite the story of Detroit, but we have come a long way. And luckily, again, I would feel a little behind the curve as just a government planner here, but I have been working with the Urban and Design Studio for almost the last 15 years, and that has been the primary role of my job. I want to talk to you a little bit about that entity, the Planning and Design Studio, and much like what Ken had talked about with Minneapolis-St. Paul, we have had a design center that's been devoted to the revitalization and transformation of our city. It was established in the late 1980s with a planning student and an architect brought to town. We were funded different ways. We were through the University of Tennessee School of Architecture, but also we had the city employees there, and again, the planners from the Regional Planning Agency worked with our Public Works Department, more or less had a home there at the design studio. And then we had development and recruitment entities and Lyndhurst and our other foundations. And I want to point out one person because he's going to show up later. This is an early picture of our staff. Of course, it was also nice. We had a professor on board who was our executive director, and I can tell you, working day to day with an urban design professor, it was so helpful. This was really for vision, creativity, to bring in that open dialogue. It more or less became the showplace for Chattanooga. We spent a lot of times in meetings and doing shows, but another role that was really important is the visualization and bringing a lot of the imagination to reality so people could see what would it be like. Also, another aspect, and I think it's one that has really helped, is having a consistent voice and the continuity. So we've had a real strong presence in Chattanooga and a group working with all these different partners that has made a difference. Another aspect, again, too, has been working with the public, and we had a strong role in our neighborhoods and still do to this day. We are now considered the community design group because we have more or less morphed and moved on from just downtown planning to we're looking at our larger region. And a little bit about the area, just again so we can look at some comparisons. We're on the Tennessee River. We have a population in our city proper of about 171,349. That's just an estimate. Our larger area is around 300 and some thousand. We're about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Atlanta. We are about 2 hours from Nashville and Knoxville. We sometimes are referred to as the Chatlanta. We're actually looking at connections that way, again, trying to embrace that larger city. We do have a good downtown daytime population of 50,000, and we have a university. The University of Tennessee at Chattanooga is downtown and brings us about 10,000 students just living on campus, so that's a real plus for us, although we are not beginning to engage our campus the way that you are here. Again, in sort of this bigger context, again, from the East Coast and here in Chattanooga, we're part of the Appalachian Range. Our town sits at with the Cumberland Plateau, the foot of the Appalachian foothills. Our mountain is Lookout Mountain. It's nothing in comparison to Mount Rainier. I'm not even going to talk about elevation because the numbers are so poor. We do have more or less a tri-state location, so we are working with North Georgia as part of our MSA and Northern Alabama. Chattanooga has always been a confluence of interstates and then earlier rail and river history. And again, just to talk a little bit about the city itself, we had a background as a trading post first, and then with the Civil War 1850s, a big stronghold for rail industry, and more or less considered the gateway to the South. So we had a very crucial position before storm of Sherman and the March on Atlanta, so Chattanooga had a big role in that. We developed, like most cities in the 1880s, was sort of our boom. We saw a lot of industry come to the area. It's for mostly things related to coal and steel. We had tanneries. I'll have to tell you, it was probably a smelly place. We still have some smelly days, I'll be honest about that. But like all communities, like I said, we had a really robust downtown, bustling downtown. And we talk about those citizens that made up our early past, and I always, as a history major, always think about the people that make up the area. And they were Scotch-Irish, we had some German, they came from the colonies and the hills of Tennessee. And let me tell you, they're a innovative bunch, and they've got a little bit rebellious spirit. But again, that's our makeup, and we have a lot of families that have been there. We call them First Family Chattanooga, FFC. But where we were really in that pre-World War II was a town that still had the railroads as one of our heavy presence in the downtown. As you can see here, we had our last passenger rail in 1970s. I hate to say it, Union Station. We had a Union Station and we tore it down in the 1970s. But the terminal station where the Chattanooga Choo-Choo is, that is still there. But again, a lot of wealth came to the area. We call them the carpetbaggers, the northerners who came and invested in our area. We have Coca-Cola money because of bottling. The first bottling was done in Chattanooga. And so we have an odd paradigm or mix of having a lot of philanthropy and foundation monies that has helped us do a lot. But with that richness, and again, richness comes in a lot of different ways, we suffered the consequences. And this is nothing we're proud of, and I'm just ashamed to even have to say in 1969, as Fern alluded to, we were noted as having the nation's dirtiest air. It hit the headlines all across the nation, and that really was an alarming moment for Chattanooga. And when you say, well, how dirty was it? I mean, Chattanooga is seeing off the chart numbers for emphysema, lung-related diseases. Even in the 70s, and I moved there in 1978, close to the 80s, they say that when men went to work, they would take an extra white shirt, because if you had an afternoon, evening meeting, you weren't going to make it through the day without soot and things on you, or that you just couldn't even see downtown. So we are one of the first communities to set up an Air Pollution and Control Bureau. We brought the city around from that non-attainment status, one of the first in the USA. By 1988, we had met our national air quality standards, and that sparked an effort called Chattanooga Venture, or Venture 2000. So in the 80s, they were looking at where would we be in 2000. And, we have, in those decades, it has taken a while to clean our air to that point. Our city, our air quality and water quality now, that was sort of our tipping point, but we don't forget that history because we don't want to go back. And we still have a strong industrial base, and we have many times come close to non-attainment again. So that's a lesson that we really keep in mind, and I think it's one of those stories that we want to continue to tell. We also had the problem of any downtown that was abandoned. This is typical of the area. This is our Walnut Street Bridge, one that was slated for demolition. Our downtown did not have a 24-hour population. As a matter of fact, we had just zero population other than some public housing. End of the day at 5 o'clock, everything shut down. Everybody went back home to the suburbs. But I want you to see, again, from that state, that is our bridge, the Walnut Street Bridge, built in 1891. We have a series of 4 bridges, and our city talks about we're the 4 bridges city, so we're so thankful to have it now. But it stands as an example of what citizens can do, and it was a community advocacy group that saved this bridge from demolition, and it became a pedestrian-only and one of the world's longest pedestrian bridges that seamed our city back together because we had the Tennessee River going between it there. We do a lot of meetings, engaging the public. This is a really good-sized crowd. If we get 400, 700 or so at a meeting, That is happening quite often. We did the Chattanooga Green Initiative, which just recently brought out a lot of folks because we, again, addressing our sustainability and air quality, water quality in 2009, adopted a climate action plan. But we'll do almost anything it takes to get people at meetings. You know, food's always a number one. Give away bicycles. Have the children there singing. I thought about that. You invite the children, well, then their parents have to come. So that gives you more numbers in the room. But what our challenge is we have a choir, and we call them sort of the downtown groupies, or our urban design groupies, and we're not reaching out to others. So that's going to be a big part of our storytelling and working towards our identity as we move forward. But out of those meetings come ideas like the Tennessee Aquarium, where people talked about what could we do to get back to the river and what would make Chattanooga unique. So the idea was to have the world's only freshwater aquarium, and everybody was like, oh, that's crazy. Who wants to see, you know, bass and bluegill and those fish? Well, we studied other cities. Baltimore was one of them, but we were able to create a story about our biology in our region, and the aquarium actually takes you through that and the whole story of the Tennessee River all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And we just recently added a saltwater aquarium, but it was estimated that there'd be about 650,000 visitors in the first year. The first year was 1.5 million. And so it attracts a lot of people. We also have worked on our waterfront, again, in the under Mayor Corker, now Senator Corker's reign, which was probably 2004. We did a 21st century waterfront development plan, working with Hargraves and Associates. We wanted to also celebrate our Cherokee history and our Trail of Tears. This point where the water fountains are is called the Passage, and that's the actual point of disembarkment for the Cherokee tribes as they were sent to Oklahoma. And we had to work with our locals and really come up for a way to tell that story. But our riverfront is now animated, doing much, much better. What was amazing was that was done in about 2 years before the mayor's administration ended and before he went on as senator. So it was one of the quickest processes I've ever seen. But again, they were able to put together the 123 million working with different private entities. One thing we've learned is always to do a high level of quality and design in our projects, and our public spaces have been able to do that, and you do that very well here with your public art. We also have electric shuttles that run downtown, and again, those were our first to have shuttles running on batteries. They do the sort of north-south route, much like the one here, but yours is on rail, and we cover them with local art. The River Walk, I want to mention the 13 miles of trail. Really, it's a promenade. It's in the urban setting, much more hefty, and we're adding more miles. But that started to raise the bar in terms of public art, the quality of the landscape and plantings, working to make sure all the connections came together, and that has been one of those catalyst projects that has been mentioned. We also right now are really into stormwater, and we're talking about stormwater. If you can imagine having too much water, which maybe you do have that here, in Chattanooga, I mean, we're really looking at the pervious, impervious. We have a mandate from the EPA. We've had some problems with overages into the Tennessee River, and so we're having to be creative about daylighting and using better practices for how we handle our stormwater. And these are just some examples. We have a Renaissance Park where we have a large biofiltration system before the water hits the Tennessee. That's right in our downtown. The water tower in a neighborhood captures rainwater. It irrigates the trees for the area. So we've tried to get multiple uses out of the projects. We also take a moment, because we're going forward, and this is probably Alan Kay, a scientist, told us the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Well, Chattanooga is at that point where we really are adjusting our sails, and we've had to think about the future. And if you think about branding, really it's that strategy and that future and the experience in place that you come, really, that's your brand. So we have been working very hard and taking that forward. We were just given a 700-acre park from the National Park Service along the Riverwalk. We started our Seattle-Chattanooga connection with Jones & Jones Architects. Have been working with us for the last 2 years on an expansion and a gateway park. But what's interesting there is that we're going to celebrate our manufacturing history. And everyone thought that with the national park coming that we would be asking those businesses to leave the riverfront and the manufacturers, and it's like, no, we want to celebrate that history. And this is an example of an interchange design that we're putting in. We worked with TDOT, and it's going to be more or less a pedestrian part of the Riverwalk, a park that highlights the manufacturers in the area. So again, we're trying to bring that story forward. Again, the greening of Chattanooga is probably one of the biggest pushes that we have right now. We're trying to look at stormwater in a different way, have people understand the watersheds that they live in. We have a resource rain program, you know, just like what a hunk. Well, we're like, what a huck. Hydrologic unit code, that doesn't gurgle up here. Okay. We get excited about it. But that really has been the other thrust for Chattanooga, is the idea that we're an outdoor community, and we've been called the Boulder, Colorado of the South. And we're like, no, wait a minute. It's Chattanooga. We're lucky that we're within 50 miles of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You can get to the Hiwassee, Ocoee, great rivers for trout fishing. You can climb, kayak, hang glide. Again, getting to that healthier lifestyle, the idea is outdoor Chattanooga is really what we're all about, and that is really what we're promoting. We also have installed a fiber optic network that is the 1 gig. We're called the Gig City. So working with the Electric Power Board, EPB, we now have the opportunity not only for households but for businesses to have the fastest internet speed in the nation, and that has been a real plus. And you talk about attracting the high tech and the startups and all of that. Well, our city is just becoming bombarded with them. With that technology, again, we are one of the cities that is in the bike share program, and it's nice to be listed there with Toronto and Boston, Chattanooga, New York. It is wonderful now that you can just get on a bike and get from meeting to meeting. You just swipe your card, and we have 300 bikes on the first pilot demonstration, 30 stations that connect our downtown. And I keep a helmet at my office desk, and you wear things that you can get around in. But one person I did want to point out is this was an urban designer that was working with us. This is our new Department of Transportation head. So you talk about people working in silos and getting in their craft. Well, our mayor appointed an urban design architect to be our next director of transportation, and things are changing. And like you said, it's really the mobility engineers that are now working with us, and we're all about the complete streets. We just adopted a policy and how we can walk, bike, and work with the automobile and transit to get around. Another big impact, of course, was the VW plant. It's been in the news a lot lately. It was finished in 2011. It's brought a lot of jobs to the area. We were lucky to have a super site, about 1,200 acres, that was at a 7,000-acre site that we had. We're using things like global green lighting, again, all tied to Wi-Fi, so our parks, our policemen can control it. New headlines for us, and this is much, much better than what we had in the past. Fast Internet is Chattanooga's new locomotive. We're working with the EV, electric vehicles and stations. And I have to admit, another thing that's good to have close by is Oak Ridge and the National Laboratory. So we've been doing a lot of work with our university in clean fuels and alternative energy work. But for the planning agency, we're really focused, and our next campaign is on place-based planning. And so we're embarking on a Great Places campaign. And I kind of feel like this may help Chattanooga in their identity and search for a brand more than anything. And it's funny because when you ask, branding Chattanooga, I mean, we've been the scenic city, the river city, now we're the gig city, this innovative spirit Chattanooga can do. Our chamber says that a lot. Really, it's these next steps that we take, and I have to admit it's a very challenging place to be, but it's so similar to Tacoma. Like I said, I think there's a lot that we can learn from both cities. So again, thank you for being here.